Welcome all to our November online book seminar with the Hague Program on International Cybersecurity. My name is Julia Carver. I'm a postdoctoral researcher here with the program, and I'm really excited that joining us today is Professor Laura DeNardis and Professor Francesca Musiani, who will be presenting their book, Geopolitics at the Internet's Core, which is also co-authored by Professor Nanette Levison and Dr. Fiona Alexander. And uh, Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our amazing speakers. And just to remind you of the Zoom protocol, if you have any questions, I would ask you to please keep them for the Q&A, which will occur after the presentation, and feel free to already start queuing up your questions. So thank you very much, and I'll now mute myself and hand it over to our speakers.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Laura DeNardis. I'm a professor at Georgetown, where I also direct the Center for Digital Ethics, and I'm very delighted to be here with my friend and colleague and longtime co-author, Dr. Francesca Musiani. We'll be the team presenting today. We've also, as Julia said, co-written this book with Fiona Alexander, who is a former government executive in the United States with extensive practical digital policy experience, and Professor Nanette Levinson, who is the director of the Internet Governance Lab at American University. So just want to say thank you again for inviting us here today. Can you hear me okay? And do the slides? Okay, you can see them. I wanted to start by saying that this book is a little bit unique. I've published 8 books in my lifetime, and this one was not like any of the other ones. It was a very unique trio of academics that span both sides of the Atlantic. We've worked together before, Francesca Musiani and I, and Nanette Levinson, but then we brought in a public government, a public policy practitioner who had deep on the ground experience with some of the subjects that we're discussing today. So that was really interesting. It was the writing process itself was a blended academic analytical research approach with this on the ground firsthand policy experience. So in a way, Fiona was our ongoing field actor interviewee for everything, as well as a very valued writing partner. So we also, in addition to our own research, many of us spend a lot of time in institutions of internet governance. We spend a lot of time reading the technical specifications of protocols, and we have a long history of understanding of the internet protocol. But we also conducted interviews with 20 internet governance experts worldwide. That was a fun part of the book. We'll share some of that later, but it was really, really interesting. And we use, in some cases, a mini case study methodology that tries to make some complex technical issues a little bit more accessible to people. I think in a way this is a dense book that's on a topic of, well, this crowd would appreciate the topic of the book because it's very technical and very inside of institutions of internet governance and then the social context around it. But for many people, they haven't heard of many of the technologies, and I think the case studies help to make it a little bit more accessible. And one other interesting aspect of this is that we just spent a lot of time together in peer review with each other. And I encourage anyone to do that. It was really interesting. We had weekly Zoom discussions, a lot of debates, a lot of coordination calls over a 4-year period. So that sets the background for it. And I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Musiani now. Dr. Musiani, will you say a little bit about the theory and framework of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Laura. So just to say a little bit of what like substance the book in terms of theory and framework. So I think that this is not a very theory heavy book. Like we do not spend a lot of time discussing references and so on, but we do have some of it at the beginning explicitly, and then we do reintroduce it in several places through the book. So the book is really a case study, a complex longitudinal case study that draws heavily from a previous joint venture of ours with Professor DeNardis and Professor Levinson, and at the time Professor Derek Coburn, which we co-edited this book, The Turn to Infrastructure in Internet Governance, also with Paul Grave Macmillan about a decade ago by now. And in that book, we have it is a co-edited book, not a co-written book, and we had several colleagues examine different case studies of how a number of powerful actors, in particular governments, but not only, turn to a number of infrastructural control points in order to carry out political functions that go beyond the original purpose of the technology. So we bring that framework into this book and apply it to the Internet Protocol as a case study. And we also draw from the ecosystem approach literature. We have important references to the science and technology studies field, in particular infrastructure studies. So we in this book, what we want to argue is that like keep understanding all the broad and complicated collection of actors and institutions that keep the Internet Protocol system operational is actually more complicated perhaps than understanding the technology itself, which is not super simple to begin with, as no one actor controls the internet. So we go back to one of these core tenets of internet governance literature as well. And I think I won't go into detail in that, but we put to the right of the slide some more details that are explained in detail in the book of what we mean by Internet Protocol ecosystem. So like the internet address space, both IPv4 and IPv6, the set of specifications that may define the various characteristics, core tenets of the Internet Protocol, a number of supporting systems that contribute vitally to the functioning of IP, and all the institutions, procedures, norms that do shape the design and administration of these systems. And maybe we can turn to the fourth slide, Laura, if you don't mind. This is the book structure. So we do have two introductory chapters that first define the IP ecosystem and why it generates geopolitical attention. And then in the second chapter, we examine like the multi-stakeholder model. It was at the time a radical governance innovation, and we introduced the key actors in this model. Then we have, I would argue, two main parts of the book. Chapter 3 to 5 are about a number of historical struggles related to the IP ecosystem and the great deal of socio-technical controversies that these struggles brought. The second part is about the link between the Internet Protocol and a number of contemporary central policy issues related to content mediation, to security, to inclusion. And this is also where we try to have numerous illustrations, as Laura was saying, about with concrete and recent case studies. And then in chapter 9, we try to draw out what could be the geopolitical and technical futures of the Internet Protocol. And we present a model that includes 8 points of power based on IP that we will say a little bit more in conclusion of the presentation. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Francesca. What do we mean when we say that the Internet Protocol is a geopolitical flashpoint? And why, more importantly, why is it? What is it that, throughout decades now, it's attracted a lot of geopolitical attention? Well, probably the easiest story for this group to understand, it's harder to explain it to lay people, but easy for you to understand. Think back to when Russia invaded Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government asked two institutions that almost no one has heard of ICANN and also RIPE NCC to essentially disconnect Russia from the internet, in part by withdrawing internet protocol addresses or IP addresses and doing some other things too related to the country code top-level domains. So ICANN and RIPE NCC refused to do so. They described their reasons for doing this, but they could have made a different decision in doing that. And I think that was really interesting to people around the world who were aware of what was happening. This was not the first time that internet addresses or the standards that structure them have landed themselves in the middle of geopolitical conflict. A few years earlier, there was this vague proposal by China and Huawei about a new IP, reinventing the internet protocol. And while there was nothing concrete, in our opinion, about that proposal, there really was a lot of urgency around the world and great concern about the prospect of redesigning the internet protocol. And it wasn't about the technology necessarily. The concern was who should control the technical architecture of the internet. This question of who should control the architecture has a very long history. And probably the oldest one that we describe in the book is this very long transition period of taking American stewardship of IP addresses and domain names. We call them the critical internet resources, from the US government to what is usually called the global multi-stakeholder internet community through ICANN now. That probably best exemplifies this constant politicization of the internet protocol. You can see there on the right-hand side, if you can see that on the screen, a senator in the United States threatened to throw our co-author, Fiona Alexander, to give her prison time and her staff if they did transition. So there was a lot of political pressure. You could actually see the congressional testimony where this occurred. And I've watched it many times, and you can find it online. But it was very, very political. It was called America's Internet Surrender by some. It was highly politicized. So rightly or wrongly, the internet protocol has become entangled with almost every digital policy concern, not only these geopolitical issues, but other ones about how to mediate, how to censor, enacting surveillance, access issues, economic competition, privacy, and absolutely content control of all forms. If you include, as we do, the domain name system in the IP ecosystem, and that's used for a lot of mediation of content, including intellectual property rights enforcement. So it's become a flashpoint for these broader struggles. It's also one of the most nerdy areas of technology. So we have to ask, well, why has it gotten wrapped up into all of these things? Several reasons. I'll mention a few of them. One is arguably it's the most fundamental and central technology that makes the internet the internet. Now, Francesca and I could make a lot of arguments for the other technologies that are central, but the way that the engineers describe the internet, they often say, if you can ping someone over IP, you're on the internet. So this is an engineering description, and I think it's actually a well-founded one. It is one of the central technologies of the internet. So as such, it plays a central role in the digital economy, the public sphere, and every facet of everything that in the real world related to the internet. It's also wrapped up in questions of who gets what resources. So this is the question of distributional equity and resource allocation. We have a chapter that I think Nanette Levinson was probably the mastermind on this chapter about digital inclusion around the internet protocol, that I feel very proud of that chapter and thank Nanette for it. But this question of who gets what resources is a big one. It also falls into these geopolitical controversies because there are some privacy issues related to how people are identified by unique addresses. So even though they're not associated with physical hardware in the same way an Ethernet address is, they become essentially permanent identifiers at the virtual level when, in combination with other information, they identify people. So that's very powerful for some countries. And then also how the system can be, I said I would give a couple of examples. I'm sorry, this is number 4 now. Also, they're wrapped up in the content moderation issue. So for all of these reasons, economic and geopolitical forces have sought to control or influence this technology, and they've also sought to co-opt it for various issues having nothing to do with keeping the internet operational. And Francesca, shall I do the next slide too, since I'm here about technical design?
Yeah, I think this was the
Okay.
process, and I'll go on with the 7.
Okay, great. Great. So the book presents some historical case studies about ways in which the very design of the internet protocol has shaped public policy. So how is the design of protocols political? I have a book called Protocol Politics that came out, I guess about 15 years ago, that addresses this, and we've all done work on this over the years. My dissertation advisor, going back further, back in 1999, she wrote a book called Inventing the Internet. That's Janet Abate. She's an STS scholar. And she said that protocols are politics by other means. So what do we mean by that? Obviously, this is a very technical issue. There are standards that are blueprints for how to create interoperability between devices. Many of these are household words that everybody has heard of, like Bluetooth, HTTPS, Wi-Fi. What are some others, Francesca, that people heard? The compression standards where you listen to music, or JPEG and the different image compression standards, voice over the internet. These are things that everyone has heard about, but they don't necessarily know what they are. They're the interoperability blueprints for everything to be able to interact with everything else. And so they do serve a technical function, but they also set public policy. Some examples of that, Francesca has a great book on encryption. Encryption standards often mediate between completely competing values, such as protecting individual privacy if you have strong encryption standards. And then the public policy needs sometimes to weaken encryption if you are someone who has had your identity stolen, or if you're someone who is being subject to sexual abuse material online. You want law enforcement to be able to do their job. So this is, it's a clash, but that's an example of the how they set public policy. And others establish the extent of online accessibility for the disabled. Our colleague Derek Cogburn does a lot of work in that area. So how they're designed has direct societal implications. And what we do in the book is we go through 3 case studies about, you could write books on each of these, and people have, and we have, but we thought that these would be 3, because one is about back from the 1990s, it's the selection of TCP/IP over a competing protocol effort known as OSI, or the Open Systems Interconnection. This selection would form the basis of modern communication, and there were a lot of institutional and geopolitical considerations around that. The second case we go into is about the politics of the next generation, the selection of IPv6 to expand the number of internet addresses available so that there could be more access. And well, that's been a long saga, so that's a really interesting case study as well. And then we decided to do one that's a little bit more about civil liberties. So we talked about the privacy implications of the design choices around various aspects of the IP ecosystem. So this was more about human rights. So if you take these cases together, they help establish the co-construction of politics and technology, as well as lay out some of the choices that have helped solidify the dominance of the internet protocol throughout the digital economy. We also have one on a chapter on security, and Francesca, would you like to take it from here? Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So as you have by now realized, we don't give you like a systematic overview of a chapter by chapter overview for timing reasons, but we thought that we would like highlight one chapter from the pale pink part and one chapter from the pale blue part. So this is one of the three from the pale blue part that links the Internet Protocol with the issues of security and geopolitical entanglements. So the reason why we did a chapter on security is that the Internet Protocol ecosystem is has a dual role in regards to internet security. It is both appropriated by actors for like executing attacks, and is itself a target for these attacks. So what we do in this chapter is to look at what are the architectures of trust that have been built around IP and that are crucial for keeping it operational, and what are the associated actors that are involved. So in particular, we look at four areas of IP-related trust infrastructure architectures that we think are like particularly central. The system of certificate authorities, the role of the border gateway protocol, so that's another like central protocol in the suite that keeps the internet functioning. The domain name system, so like in itself, which is perhaps in itself an ecosystem with all the different actors that that are involved in it, but it's basically like the phone book of the internet. And the IP addresses themselves and the fact that they are used as identifiers in a number of configurations. So the shift from an inherent trust in who is close to us, like colleagues and friends, to the need to develop and deploy security standards and tools in order to erect like trust like a scaffolding has really made security in the ecosystem of the Internet Protocol as much about the institutions and governance structures that support it and regulate it as it is about the technology itself. So we try to convey this in the chapter via these more specific examples. And one of the things that we remark in the end by the end of this chapter is that advancements in technology and in computing power only serve to reinforce the idea that security is actually never neither perfect nor done and stabilized once and for all. As I mentioned in the last chapter, which is a conclusion, but also like an overture towards several things that could happen in the more or less close future, we propose a taxonomy of like 8 points of power in the IP ecosystem. So this is it. There is first an aspect of like architectural design. So the idea that actors exert authority over design of the Internet Protocol and supporting systems. And there are a number of like procedural and participatory norms that contribute to shape the design of these systems, and essentially they do enact technically mediated public policy around issues like privacy or security or access. So this is again where the chapter on inclusion comes in. You don't hear more specifically from it today because Nanette has not joined us, but probably it would have been otherwise highlighted also. There is the points of power of like distributional forces, the control over the distribution of internet addresses that are a finite resource, and how and whether these resources are distributed over time, geographically or by sector, and either by administrative means or by markets. The third aspect is possessorship, so the influence via who historically possesses or acquires the ability to use an IP address over time. And like, for example, what influence do holders of large IP address blocks have over the overall systems. Like what does the fact of actually owning a bunch of IP addresses does to this system. The power of intermediation, so the power that like includes co-opting or using in some way the IP-related infrastructure for purposes of either blocking content or disrupting internet flows. The aspect of extraterritoriality, so control by bringing IP addresses, protocols, ecosystems, and governance into conflicts that are related to global policy issues and are thus cross-border. Securitization, so all the, as we mentioned in the previous slide, the security decision points around the IP ecosystems and decisions that do mediate the tensions in values. As Laura mentioned, encryption is a prime example of this. Like it is a matter of placing a cursor between a need for strong security to protect critical infrastructures, economy, privacy, data protection, and so on, and the need for security for law enforcement, intelligence, and cyber offense. So there is an aspect of like identification, all the decisions that are about anonymity, personal identity, authentication, and traceability. So this has to do with individual privacy and all that relates to protecting one's identity on the internet from identity theft and harassment, notably. And finally, what we call the politics of structuralization. So like all the power dynamics that are behind the attempts to shape either procedurally or institutionally or reconfigure otherwise the governance system that administers IP addresses. And so Laura, maybe you can talk about the geopolitical futures and technical futures.
Certainly. And let me just pause for a moment too and ask if anyone would like a PDF of the book for any reason, including to take a look at these 8 points of power or anything else. Would you just email Francesca or email me, and we'd be happy to send you a PDF of it if you want to take a closer look at this. The book is, unbeknownst to us, quite expensive, but we do have a PDF version of it. So if you want to take a look at it, just email me or email Francesca. Right, Francesca?
Absolutely.
We're very happy to do that to any scholar, give it to any scholars. So thank you for going through that, Francesca. We also wanted to mention that we have a closing chapter, and this chapter probably reflects more of the interviews that we had than anything else. People were very opinionated about where IP is going, where internet governance is going, and really where the technology is going too. So we get into that future. I'll mention a few of these. So many changes throughout the history of the internet. You've seen many of them. But the internet protocol has endured, and throughout all of this, it's really been remarkable to see how long it has endured. It's had some changes, but it's still there. And it's helped propel many emerging technologies from the web to social media, smartphones, and AI. And obviously, the internet is completely entangled in AI now. Systems of AI run on the internet, but also AI is diffused throughout the internet, such as cybersecurity, pattern detection, network management. So it's completely entangled. So where will this go? It's likely, as we describe in the book, it's likely that the internet and therefore IP will go into both infinitesimally small spaces and astronomically large spaces, leaping from two-dimensional screens to three-dimensional screens and also biological space. So we describe, we're already there with the Internet of Things, of course, but now those things are going, on and inside, further inside of the body. We also will see cyber brain interfaces. There are many quantum internet entanglements. I was a National Science Foundation quantum fellow and did a lot of work about those entanglements. I'd be happy to talk about that. I can bore you about the quantum entanglements. But also the solar system internet is a big one, where there's work on moving protocols from the Earth and into the solar system. I have a paper on that, solar system internet architecture and governance, that I co-wrote with Vinton Cerf, NASA, and some other interesting people. It's a really interesting problem because the internet protocol and the surrounding ecosystem will run into a lot more disruptions, a lot more problems of long distances and therefore latency. And so there's an effort underway to redesign some surrounding protocols to be able to deal with that disruption and the harsh conditions of space. So that is really interesting. That's where the internet is going. Is it too early to discuss that? Julia, Alina, others, is it too early to discuss the solar system internet? Not if history is any indication. I've been around long enough to really be amazed by how quickly technology changes. Just remember that ARPANET, never mind the internet, is in living memory.
Mhm.
Web browsers only date back to the early 1990s when there was still no Facebook, no Google, absolutely no TikTok, no smartphones. There was no Internet of Things and no streaming video. And it's really important to just take a moment and remember that. That's in living history. And so in your living history, there will be that similar, stunning, rapid intensification of technologies. What are these all? The examples that we use all have one thing in common, and that is that they're not about what you do through a screen. They're about going into the material world of space, the material world of quantum communication, the material world of the objects all around us, and the material world of the brain and the human body and human flesh. So that's a pretty big leap that we have happening right now, moving from 2D to 3D. And so it's definitely not too early to think about that. Francesca, I think I'll read the closing paragraph of the book and then turn it over to you for some conclusions. It's very short if you'll just endure this. The societal stakes of the Internet protocol ecosystem will only increase as digital and possibly quantum networks embed further into humans, objects, financial systems, medicine, the earth, and into the solar system. Technological change will continue from AI to neuroscience and biotech interfaces that are not yet envisioned. If history is any indication, the rising stakes of these new applications will be accompanied by ongoing geopolitical struggles and crises. Indeed, they have already begun, and yet the internet continues with IP at its core. So thank you for letting me read that, and I'll turn it over to Francesca for some closing thoughts, and then we look forward to your ideas and questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Just to conclude, I think we can say, first of all, that the IP Internet Protocol has been born out of conflict since its inception, and like the historical struggles we retrace show it very, very well. And there's one remarkable feature of its evolution is that as each issue becomes resolved, actual geopolitical tensions seem inversely to escalate. The Internet Protocol has occupied a unique place at the center of many public policy issues in the digital era. We can argue whether that's like for the good or not. If history is any indication, there are a number of controversies around the core internet architecture, the core protocols that keep the internet operational and so on, that are really a feature of our socio-technical world. They have been structural to it, and so most likely they will keep on going. And just as technical architecture is not fixed and the subject of many evolutions, internet governance issues are not fixed either. But IP architecture and IP governance systems have actually remained at the internet's core, among the few things that have remained as such. And it has really endured, IP has really endured as a major mediating sites for a number of geopolitical controversies over the digital world. And we can probably safely say that how this conflict unfold will have important consequences in the future for human rights, for national security, for economic stability, and ultimately for the very heart of the internet and how it works and keeps working. And I guess that in the end we did do it like a half an hour talk, and we look forward to your questions.